Hello and welcome to Critical 99. My name's Tom Ramblick. Thank you for joining me for this particular podcast. It's been about a week or so since the federal budget, and everybody's been analysing it and wondering what the consequences are for them and for their future, particularly in the environment of a pandemic. One of the critical areas, of course, is small business and the impact not only the pandemic has had on small business, but what impact the budgetary measures that were announced by the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, are going to have on small business as it emerges from the current paralysis brought on by the pandemic and the current environment in terms of employment and in sort of the supply issues with suppliers, creditors, and other things. So joining me today for this podcast is someone who knows a lot about it because they're his client base. Sam Allert is the CEO of Reckon, as Reckon produces all manner of software and compliance tools for people. And Sam's going to take us through what Reckon has as a perspective on the federal budget and what issues look like emerging over the next little while. Sam, thanks for joining me,
Thanks very much, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
and thank you for your time. Now, there have been a range of complications with the coronavirus for small business.
Yes.
Um, uh, what? How do you see the federal budget measures in concert with what's happened over the past 6 to 9 months with coronavirus?
Yeah. Well, obviously, Tom, it's been a year like no other, and really, it to me or to Reckon and our client base, it would feel like a budget like no other. Um, and I think the year has almost gone in two halves. So we've got the devastating pandemic affecting communities and economies around the world, health and economically. And so the first half of the year was really about investing in the economy to keep us going. So that was all stimulus and investment to keep us going. And what the budget's really doing is investing in the future and our economic recovery. Um, and I'd have to say, so we did a survey pre-budget. We surveyed well over 1,000 small businesses, not only Reckon clients, but small businesses all over Australia. And we asked them what's the top things they're looking for from the budget, and how are they feeling coming up to the budget. And look, obviously, there's a lot of fear out there. I think, as an interesting statistic we got back, Tom, 1 in 4 of our respondents, so 23% of people said they're not going to exist, or their business is not going to exist this time next year without government support. Um, and so it was critically important that the government, Josh Frydenberg, Scott Morrison, and their teams um, delivered economic stimulus, tax relief, and also, I guess, got the economy going, got some cash back in the economy, and got us all moving. And so I think, based on the wish list that we saw from small businesses, I'd have to say it feels like the government's done a really good job and kind of hit the nail on the head with their intent and their drive to stimulate the economy and invest in the future. Now, I don't get into politics or political commentary so much, Tom, but um, I do sort of watch from afar, and I think it's very easy to address or highlight shortfalls or shortcomings, especially when you've got two sides in politics. They always like to highlight the issues of the other party. So, overall, I think the government's done a great job delivering this budget. There's no doubt that there could have been some other areas they looked at, and there's no doubt there's going to be some commentary around, well, they didn't get this right. But overall, I mean, the top three things that small businesses were looking for in our survey was job creation and reducing unemployment. Um, I was going to say, not surprisingly, the number two was mental health support, and the third one was income tax reduction and personal income tax reduction. And all three of those have been addressed and invested in this budget.
One of the points you made, if I can dial back a bit in the answer you've just given, one of the things that you mentioned was the fact that uh, there's a continual ping pong between political parties
Yeah,
and commentators, not just political parties. To what extent do you feel the that adversarial um, nature or that kind of gladiatorial climate creates a or adds to the environment, if you like, of despondency amongst business people?
I think it's hugely unproductive. Um, I don't have a solution for it. Like we need multiple parties of government. Like you can't have one side. We're not a dictatorship.
Yeah,
But I think you also said a good point there. So you've not only got different parties arguing and playing popularity ping pong, but you've also got other commentators and you've got the media. And over recent years, I would say the media is actually the worst commentator on it, and I think the reason for that is the I guess the access to information and the whole clickbait scenario that the media wants you to click on the article, so they're going to give an extremist headline that actually is blowing a maybe a small issue or maybe not even the most important issue, but it's just blowing it out of perspective. And if everyone's watching our back for false information or critical information, or or just to stay in your role, if you've got to put 25% of your time into that, that's 25% less time you can put into making the right decisions on economic policy and driving the country forward. And again, I don't get into political commentary, but just have a look at what's happening in almost every state at the moment. But particularly, I mean, in Victoria, Dan Andrews under a lot of scrutiny and pressure. And again, I'm not going to comment on that. I might come back to lockdowns and border closures later if appropriate. But also then have a look in New South Wales and what Gladys, the pressure she's under. And again, I don't want to comment too much on it, only that I say I think she's done an amazing job, and not just through COVID, but in her leadership. And she led us through the bushfires, and now due to a personal relationship many years ago, that's all the media wants to talk about.
it the there's an underlying thing that I guess has concerned me for a while, and it's clear that it concerns you, and that is that there's. Do you consider the current environment one where you're unable to discuss the nuance of particular policy or particular developments without somebody wanting to oversimplify it?
Um, yes, although I think simplifying it sometimes is important, especially for the wider community and small business. I think more, we need rigorous debate of policy, taxation, compliance, for the betterment of the country and the economy and jobs and industry and everything. And so you need that debate. But I worry personally that sometimes in politics and often in media, the debate is not with the right intent. It's not with the long term view, it's with the short term view of either getting more clicks on an article or knocking a party out of favour so that party can get in. So I think the problem is we need to have a debate with all having the debate with the right long term intent for the right of the economy.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is the mental health measures the budget has got in place, and some of the other initiatives that have come into play since COVID has been around. And you're pretty well connected with the people that use your products
Mhm.
and to your network of partners. Are you hearing much in the way of from them with respect to the mental health impact on practitioners out there in small business or in accounting firms?
Yeah, it's very real, and it's a genuine problem. I think it's wonderful to see, and lucky, I guess, before COVID, that mental health was a much more acceptable topic. We could all talk about it, whether you're a business leader, a sports person, and I think that's super important going forward. It can't be swept under the carpet or anything like that. So that's great. And then I guess I was openly, Tom, I was probably a little surprised that it was number two for our survey respondents to say the number two thing they are looking for. So 70% of respondents said they're looking for mental health support. So that really to us highlighted just how important that is. And in fact, I guess unsurprisingly, it was the number one um, um, request for small businesses in Victoria. So I think it's excellent to see the government's announce. I think the number was circa 5.7 billion worth of additional mental health support, and specifically mental health support for small businesses. And I think that's super important. And then you mentioned the professional advisors, Tom. First of all, a shout out to them. I've done this a couple of times, but we at Reckon have really spoken about the accounting, bookkeeping, financial advice community as the frontline workers of the economic impact. And just to share some stories. So yes, we provide software to small businesses, but 50% of our business is providing software to accounting practices. And accounting practices are businesses themselves. So all of our Reckon APS or Reckon Elite clients, I mean, you're running an accounting practice, they've got the exact same problem as all of their clients. They had to all of a sudden go into lockdown. They had to make sure their systems and their team were safe and their systems worked and they could continue their business operating. And then at the same time, they were getting their clients ring them. So they were getting inundated with questions and issues about how do I keep my business going? How do I get government stimulus? How do I apply for JobKeeper? The tax office portal's down. What do I do there? How do I get tax relief? So I really credit the accounting and bookkeeping profession for what they've done. I mean, I know some practices that have been busier than ever dealing with very tough situations with businesses that are struggling, but also dealing with the fact they're trying to keep their business running in a pandemic essentially. So I think accountants, bookkeepers have done an amazing job. That said, again, we've got to think about mental health. And before we started recording, you and I were talking about Andrew Conway and the team at the IPA, and we work closely with them with some of our software solutions. And Andrew and I and both of our teams, we're all big supporters of the importance of supporting not only businesses but the profession, the accounting profession, with mental health, because they've got the challenge of running their own business, and then the challenge of supporting all of their clients who now more than ever are going through tough times.
There is something that is aligned with that. You know, the minute you lock down a state or lock down a local government area or a state, as has happened here in Victoria, or an entire country, uh, people then turn to technology to try and continue doing what they would otherwise do in their office. Did you find any? Did you have to do anything at Reckon to um, upgrade or um, change any products to assist people in getting themselves fit to
That
work remotely?
that is an excellent question, Tom. And again, we've got different software for different industries. So we've got software for the small business sector running their accounting and payroll, and we've got software for the accounting profession running their practice management and compliance. And short answer is yes, we did have to move quick, and I'll give you that example. And then I guess a longer answer is, fortunately, all of our newer applications and our big focus over a number of years now has been cloud and cloud first. So fortunately, technology today really enabled businesses and accountants to work remotely. And then I think and really love the effort that the whole Reckon team put into it was working with clients who may have even been on old versions or may have not yet been in the cloud, but it was all about education and support. So we didn't have to make so much of a change there, but we really had to educate, support, and in some cases, really help clients get access to their systems if they weren't already in the cloud. And some of our software is not in the cloud, so we really had to move there to support them. Where we did have to make a change was JobKeeper, and also with every tax change and tax rate change or legislative change that impacts a particular percentage or a way you calculate things, we have to change our payroll software, our taxation software, our accounting software, and make sure that our clients all have that latest version and update. So there was definitely a few changes like that. But the biggest one we saw was JobKeeper. So JobKeeper, you could request JobKeeper and then track your JobKeeper payments a couple of ways. One, through your advisor, but the most popular way, and the way the government really wanted people to manage their JobKeeper, was through single touch payroll. And single touch payroll has been legislated now for a bit over a year for all businesses. But the ATO knows, and they share the stats, that there's still circa 250,000 businesses that are not single touch payroll compliant. So we had to make sure that our single touch payroll software was JobKeeper enabled, and that all of our clients could easily submit, receive, and report on their JobKeeper payments, and we did that. And then also we did see, interestingly enough, one of those kind of good news in a bad situation area. We did see a real spike in people taking our single touch payroll app and our payroll app. So we've got a free single touch payroll app where people can manage their single touch payroll and JobKeeper information. So we saw a real spike in new trials and new users coming on board because of that compliance obligation.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that there were still people who were uncomfortable with the cloud or didn't quite trust the cloud to deal with their data properly. How much work did your team have to do to put people at ease?
Yeah, that's an ongoing discussion, and it's one that's probably less. Each day almost there's less people worried about the cloud. I mean, just look at what we do, and everyone uses internet banking as an example. We've been doing that for many years. I use whatever you do on your mobile, that's completely in the cloud, and look at everything that's been shared on an app. So I must say it's very much a declining number of clients. That said, we do offer products that aren't in the cloud in all of our areas, and we support those businesses. And typically, they're often quite sizable businesses, Tom, and that's because they've been in business for a number of years. They've had our software running their business for a number of years. It's not a cloud version, and they prefer just to keep all of their data and systems the way they've done it forever. We support those clients. That's absolutely fine. We obviously also encourage and give them a complete upgrade path to the cloud. But it is. Sorry, I've probably gone on a bit. That was a bit long-winded, but it is an ongoing education piece
Yeah.
in terms of the benefits and also the speed. So for our cloud versions, as an example, any tax rate change, any JobKeeper change, the minute we put that in, it's in the software and everyone gets access. For our
Yes.
non-cloud clients, we put that in the software and we make it downloadable for them. And so if they weren't looking for that download, they're potentially using something with last year's tax rate in it.
That's an interesting point. I mean, in a previous life, I happen to deal with the occasional member of an organisation that still did tax by paper, tax returns in a paper format, and wondered why the clients were no longer contacting him for information. The clients had discovered they could lodge the tax returns on their own via MyGov.
Yes.
Uh, and that was one practitioner in particular who refused to use computers, feared catching a virus, and all that kind of thing. And business just went out the door. So it's an interesting. It's interesting to see people still hold on to some of the
Yeah,
other things.
I must again reiterate, it's a smaller amount each day,
Yep.
and really, but your point's an interesting one, and I'll just say that we spend a lot of time educating the small business market and the accounting profession just in what trends are happening in technology, and it's moving very fast. It's moving faster than I think we've ever seen before. Not just technology, but worldwide change. And again, never before increased as fast as we've seen in a year with COVID of all of the changes we've had to experience. But our point is, have a look at your business, take stock. Do the old adage: sit back, take a breath, check in with your goals. How's the business going? What's working well? What can be improved? And then have a look. Once you've done that, then have a look at your technology. I think sometimes people are convinced by the advertising of, you know, download this latest version of software will solve your problems. Well, maybe they didn't have that problem in the first place. So we do spend a lot of time trying to educate business and accountants in all of the options, but also making sure that it aligns with their business goals and requirements.
I guess I'm mindful of the time, Sam. So the couple of other minor issues I wanted to touch on. You deal in the accounting compliance space with the products you produce.
Yes.
Uh, how complex, in your view, is the environment becoming? Um,
Mm,
from your perspective as a CEO as well, and also as someone who heads a team that deals with trying to make the world more workable and accessible to people.
yeah. uh, Not coming, but is extremely complex. We we have very very complex compliance legislation and therefore processes. Now, again, I wish I had an easy answer to solve that. I don't, and we work very closely with the ATO and the government on compliance changes and everything. But there's no question that if you surveyed accountants and businesses and said, what's one thing we could do to streamline your process, make everyone more profitable, more efficient, it would be reduce red tape and reduce the compliance burden of the process and the obligation. And look, it exists for the right reason. I don't disagree with compliance. It's there for the right reason. Um, but we do have a very, very complex tax system and compliance system in Australia. So I think it goes back to our earlier point, Tom, actually, about the one way to change that would be positive legislative change that simplified things and streamlined things. But I think often that doesn't get brought up by governments for fear of losing power. And so it's, sometimes maybe the bigger decisions or harder decisions aren't being raised and debated because they understandably want to stay in government rather than let's have real serious tax reform and legislative change discussions.
And that's certainly something that people will need to do in the next little while. Sam, as I said, I'm mindful of the time, but one of the things I do want to do is to for you to tell people where they can find some of the material that Reckon's got. Um, where can they want to know more about the company? Where can they all go?
Yeah, very proudly share that with you, Tom. Look, go to our website. It's all there, and that's just reckon.com. But those who might not be aware, I mean, we're a very proud Australian company in business for 30 years, listed on the ASX for 20 years. Australia is our head office. I'm sitting in the office here in North Sydney. We employ circa 300 people, but we also have offices. We've got a big New Zealand team and client base, and we've also got offices in the US and the UK, albeit a smaller part of our business. But yeah, if you go to reckon.com, obviously there'll be everything from about us and our solutions, and a really funny photo of me on there.
Okay. Look, Sam, it's been great chatting with you about the budget, business conditions, and the way in which people have tried to handle the transition from working in an office to working at home during COVID. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you, Tom. My pleasure.
And hope we can do this again. And to the listeners out there, stay safe, look after each other, and have a great weekend.
I agree. Stay safe.